So let's start to make a presentation, and I will be the last one, actually. I will give the stage to ladies first, and I would start from Samanta and Natalie. Natalie first, in terms of, N is first, then S. So
Sure.
that's it. Go ahead,
Okay,
please.
thanks, Giovanni. My name's Natalie Barnett. I'm the VP of Clinical Research at a company called Nanit. We make a camera that uses computer vision and AI to measure sleep in infants and toddlers without any sensors or anything touching the baby. Our sleep-wake algorithms are validated against actigraphy and polysomnography, and so we are a consumer device that's sold primarily in the US, but also around the world. But we are also used as a research tool by clinicians and researchers all over the world.
Yeah, thank you. Samanta?
Yes. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm Samanta. I'm a sleep, ear, nose, and throat doctor. I work in my clinical practice and also with technology companies. I advise some technology companies, and I believe that working as a liaison between the practice and also technology and management companies is a great way to contribute to medicine. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Marvin?
Wonderful. Marvin Amberg. I started naturalX Health Ventures. It's a 100 million Series A/B fund. We are exclusively focused on consumer healthcare, and we are backed by a German pharmaceutical company. In consumer healthcare, we look at two areas. One is mental health and one's proactive health. We've done our first investments here, particularly mental health. Now we're looking more into proactive health, and here we look at, let's say, supplements, wearables, prevention, longevity. So sleep fits very well into this category and also into mental health. So we're looking into it. We haven't invested into it yet, but we will.
Thank you. Oren?
I'm Oren Cohen. I'm a physician scientist at Mount Sinai, focusing on sleep in my clinical practice and research on sleep apnea and cardiovascular disease outcomes. We use machine learning and AI to predict which patient populations may benefit from therapy.
Thank you very much. Myself, I'm a biologist as a training, PhD in molecular oncology, and I'm a partner of Biotech. It's a biotech fund in Italy. Our fund, our management company has 6 funds under management. The one up and running is the Biotech one, but we had a previous one which was investing in digital and deep tech, and now it's investing, it's raising funds for 2025, so there will be a new fund that will be investing in digital and deep tech, and also biotech. Okay, so let's start. I'm a customer of these guys because I don't sleep. So that's the only thing that I said to the organizer. My knowledge here is that I don't sleep. So let us understand what we can do and what is the problem behind it. So basically, Oren, yourself, you're a clinician. You are actually in the intersection between therapies, digital tools, and you are in contact with the patients. So what are actually the problems that you see with those people related to sleep in terms of, several indications, if you can think of?
So in clinical practice, what I'm seeing most commonly are behavioral sleep issues, so poor sleep hygiene or insufficient sleep. And then clinical diagnoses like sleep apnea predominate and chronic insomnia, as well as some circadian rhythm disorders, as well as restless legs. So I think that's the majority of the clinical practice. In terms of the space for digital tools, seeing a lot of tools that are in coaching and in behavioral modification for behavioral disorders related to sleep, for insufficient sleep, and then tools to detect sleep apnea, and as well as apps and applications that can help to guide patients through treatment for chronic insomnia.
So, sorry, Oren, what do you think about the clinicians? Are the clinicians thinking that is a proper clinical need, the sleep?
Definitely. There is a lot more public awareness about sleep and sleep disorders, and even sleep medicine as a field. I met some people today even that said, I didn't realize that there was a sleep specialty. And as you see, they come from either the surgical side and ENT, or the medical side from neurology, pulmonary, internal medicine, psychiatry. And there's a huge need there's a shortage of sleep physicians. We've heard about physician shortages in general throughout this conference. there's a shortage of sleep physicians, and there's an influx in patients because of wearable tools and because of the awareness of the importance of sleep.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. So there is a clinical need actually. And Marvin, what do you think about the market, about the sleep tech? And there is a business, real business behind it.
Yeah,
and the digital tools, yeah.
There for sure is a business. So we see more and more startups in the space. A lot is coming from the supplement and content space. So when we look at the market, let me guide you through. We look at two segments. We look at the insights and data collection, and then we look at the interventions. So when we look at the insights, we go through and we see consumer tracking devices, which you all know as the nearables, the wearables, the auras, groups, and so on. And that definitely is a market. And we've seen there was a recent investment round of Aura at 75 million to 5 billion grouping valuation, we have to say. So money is going into this. But for us to find new investment opportunities is difficult because we don't really see differentiation, and those incumbents are quite strong. So then when we go on, we see testing devices, or not testing devices, sorry, consumer tests, so hormone testing, genetic testing, which has its place, but we don't really see that, once you've done your chronotype, how's it going to help you? So it's not sustainable models. Where we see more of the market is definitely in the B2B diagnostics. And there, you just mentioned it, sleep apnea, it's a big market, and we see that a lot of the sleep labs are actually moving to the moving home. We have like a lot of home sleep testing devices now. A lot of those are driven by companies like ResMed or Philips, and we see a few startups in the space as well, which are actually touchless, which is quite nice. Now, when we move to the intervention space, there is a lot of environmental interventions. We can think about acoustics, there's a lot of solutions there. Then temperature regulation, there's 8 Sleep, a lot of people heard of that company. It regulates the temperature of the mattress. There's actually a really cool company in this space which relies called Amelia. It uses a wristband for women in menopause, which often have hot flushes at night. And when it detects hot flushes, a pillow is cooling them down so they don't wake up. So we think that there's a lot of money going into the environmental space for sure in the future. Then a couple more. The behavioral space is difficult, we think. CBT isn't really working, we think. We look a little bit at brain stimulation, which we find very interesting. There's a lot happening there. And finally, again, where we see the big market is in sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is underdiagnosed. There's a lot more awareness for it. It's a gigantic market. And here we have the CPAPs, the normal solutions, but also more innovative solutions like Inspire, which give you an implant which stimulates the tongue so you can sleep at night. So we think that's where the real market is going to be in the future.
But in terms of, you see this technology quite often. What do you think is the percentage of this technology that achieved to the point, achieved the real point to be a good validation? I mean, what is your guess in 10%, 20% of the things that you see are really validated, or do you think...
You mean clinically validated?
That can help the patients, let's say, so clinical validated.
That can help the patient. To some extent, if you believe in placebo, probably all. But then from the amount of startups and opportunities we see, probably less than half.
Then less than half. Well, it's
we get a lot of very early stage opportunities in. And
I wanted to just jump in on something that Marvin said. I think there are a lot of technologies in the adult space that are fairly well developed, and I think there's a lot of opportunities in the pediatric space. A lot of things that are very underdeveloped in the pediatric space. We know well that when infants and toddlers learn to sleep well, when they're very young, they become children who sleep well and do well at school. They become adults who, sleep well and perform better in all sorts of areas of their lives. And so establishing these early sleep habits very early on, I think, is a really great opportunity for us. But thinking about also diagnosing a whole host of different disorders. In the pediatric space, I think there's a lot of opportunities there. We know that babies are spending, the majority of their time asleep. And a lot of things happen in that crib space over the night that we can track through the camera or through a microphone or through, other technologies. And I think it will be really interesting for us to see where that takes us. For example, we have developed a head position algorithm. The guy who developed this sitting right there, and we can now say, with great certainty, what proportion of the night a baby's head was facing in one position or another. We know that one of the about 10% of babies are diagnosed with either torticollis or plagiocephaly, which is a sort of tightening of the neck muscles or a flattening of the head. And we can see very clearly in our head position algorithm the babies who have torticollis and plagiocephaly and those that don't, and we can track improvement in their head position or track improvement in their range of motion after they have been diagnosed with that. So I think that's just one example of a technology that has promise in the future, but I think there's lots of other things in the pediatric space specifically.
Okay, thank you. So we went from investing in technology, and now we go back to the basic science, because actually you were mentioning almost a clinical trial for what I am seeing. But I would like to go to Samanta. And Samanta, what do you think is what is the difference between what today it's being discovered by basic science, translational medicine, and the technology? So we see actually there are many attempts to solve the problems, but where do we stand in terms of real science, scientific science, scientific research? Sorry.
This is a very good question, Giovanni, because we see that the sleep medicine is being revolutionized by tech companies. So the last European sleep conference, two months ago, in fact, Oren gave us a lot of insights about sleep, right? So technology companies can, let's say, empower us with information from patients from all over the world in a way that we today cannot, right, with clinical trials. There are several companies doing this. I remember seeing this many, many years ago. WeThings that just presented, they had a paper on tracking the speed in which people walk, so you can also do a correlation with anxiety, and we're seeing this more and more in sleep. So I do believe that tech companies can help us give more insights and even maybe also help validate clinical solutions in the practice, because you were asking this to Marvin, I mean, how can we relate and how can we know if the solutions are working well? And one thing that we don't talk much is adherence to treatment. So one thing is when you produce a solution in the lab and in a constrained environment, and another thing is real practice, right? And we see this with CPAP, for example, that the adherence to CPAP changes through countries depending on how you keep track of the patient and so on. So I think that technology can also help us monitor the patients better and try to find what is the best solution to that case, right?
Yeah, let's go to the clinician side again, to Oren. So Oren, we're talking about digital tools and everything, but in terms of intervention, Marvin mentions some, but in terms of really medicines, there is something that you can do to, to make people to sleep better and to avoid any problem? Because, as a person that used some drugs, it was quite complicated because I was using benzodiazepine, I can say. So it was devastating for me. After 3 months, I got tachycardia, I got very, so where do we stand today?
Yeah, so it depends on the condition that we're discussing. So
Yeah.
For chronic insomnia, the first line American Academy of Sleep Medicine approach would be to do cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And that's why I think that there's a huge need, and cognitive behavioral therapists are in even shorter supply than sleep physicians and nurse practitioners, frontline providers. To be able to deploy a successful CBTI tool using tech, I think, is a huge unmet need. And there are a lot of players in the space, some doing it better than others. The issues are in reimbursement and how do those companies then utilize those tools and get reimbursed for them so it doesn't come out of patients' pockets, so that we're not worsening health equity and we're improving outcomes for all of our patients. So that's one condition. If we're talking about sleep apnea, yes, there's an explosion in tech. CPAP is still predominating, but there are drugs that are being developed. There are all sorts of devices that are being developed, not just the Inspire. There's a couple other on the market that are using not just hypoglossal nerve stimulation, but targeting some other areas in the upper airway as well. And so it really depends on what the underlying condition is. And then I think what a lot of people are suffering from, which don't necessarily fit neatly into any of these diagnostic categories, but some of that behavioral sleep stuff that I was talking about was improving sleep hygiene and the realization that sufficient sleep time is important. And there's a lot of opportunity for in the commercial space. And that's where I think some of the wearables have improved and helped sleep the most, is by improving awareness in how much people are sleeping, giving people a generic sleep score on their apps as some sort of biofeedback to tell them, or some sort of feedback to tell them how they're doing in their sleep timing. So I think that we have made great strides, and there's a lot more to be done.
Oh, that's very good. Well, let's hope for that. So, what do you think, Marvin? What is the trend? What do you think is going to happen in the future?
Yeah, I completely agree there. I think this is not a trend, it's here to stay, it's just accelerating. There's a lot more adoption, there's a lot more awareness. In fact, it's quite interesting when you go on Google Trends and you look at diet, exercise, and sleep, which we all need for preventative care. And we look at the last 15 years, we see that exercise and diet kind of stayed at the same level, while sleep is continuously rising. So that tells us that there is more to come. We see more and more startups in this space. There's actually VC now focused primarily on sleep tech. It's called Supermoon Capital out of the US. It's worth checking out. So when we look at the market, we see a few trends here. We see that, and you are hinting at that the consumer space and the clinical space, they're really melting. As you just said, consumer apps could be used more and more for clinical purposes. At the same time, the sleep lab is coming to your home. We just had the investment into Aura by Dexcom. So Dexcom is a clinical company doing CGMs. They are now going to the consumer space, and we find that quite interesting.
Oh, that's very interesting. So,
and can I just add on to Marvin's point? And the thing that I am very excited about is how tech can really accelerate research. So it just means that we can conduct research much faster, much more simply than we've been able to in the past. We've all been sleep scientists for a long time, so it's very exciting for us to see sleep having the moment that it's having. And to Marvin's point, I think it's only going to become a bigger investment opportunity in the coming decade.
That was actually my next question, meaning, actually, if you want to guess what is missing in reality, if you see the technology and you see the science. So 2 questions for each one of you, actually. One is, what is your suggestion for people that have, in this, problem with sleep and sleep tech and everything? And the second one, what is the missing, is there a gap that can be, and what is the missing point here to get something that is really disruptive?
Can I?
Yes, please, Samanta.
Yeah, so the first question was it, what we can suggest, let's say recommend? So I would recommend not to focus too much on sleep, because as Marvin mentioned, that the awareness of sleep is growing, and I see some patients, and especially when they're using too much technology, there's the placebo effect and there's the nocebo effect. When you do a kind of intervention that makes it worse. So we see sometimes some patients like, oh, I thought that I had slept well, but my watch says I haven't. So you start being so obsessed with data that you start not acknowledging yourself, right? You lose your self-awareness because you rely only on the watch. And we have to remember that this is a consumer device. It's not a medical device. It doesn't have the accuracy. So you cannot say that you didn't sleep well just because it says something, right? We have to trust in ourselves more. So I would say, let's say, the first thing would be to not focus much on sleep, because people think sometimes that it's a separate thing. Your brain is not like you're going to shut off and go to bed. Your sleep also reflects what you do during the day. So if you're too stressed, if you don't exercise, you're not going to have a good sleep. So if you focus on having, let's say, a good diet, good weight, and exercising, you're already doing a lot on sleep.
I can understand that. You, Marvin? Yes.
I would actually tell people to focus more on sleep, because for us, when we look at preventative care, it's like the low-hanging fruit where you can have the biggest impact with the least effort. Everyone's already looking into diet and has been done so for ages. Everyone's doing exercise, or most people, and they know about it, but it's learning about sleep and at least knowing when you don't sleep well and what you can do, I think, is a big leverage. Now, what we would be looking for is for all those people that use wearables and trackers to have those devices to be a bit more holistic, to go into intervention as well. Because right now, I mean, I've been wearing them for ages and I will, but others say, well, I've been wearing it for a couple of months, I've learned about it, and they put them away again. Because, I mean, what then once you've learned the insight? And the next step is often missing.
But can I just make an observation on what you said? I agree with you for many cases, but let's say sometimes in clinical practice we see the opposite of the patients that get so obsessed with data. So yeah, I think technology helps a lot, but we also have to look at, let's say, the downside. Maybe those patients who need it the most, who have the worst sleep, are the ones who also don't have good habits during the day. And these are sometimes the hardest ones for you to, have a good diet, yeah.
But if I can jump in on this, I was scared when I first spoke with Oren about what are the problems. But he starts saying, oh, there are some cardiometabolic diseases, cardiovascular diseases. So give you some suggestion, to avoid for this to happen. I think it's really an important point, and it's not only you sleep and you feel better. There are disease behind it. So that was something that I was not aware of, to be honest. Yeah. So that can be causal, that the sleep can be causal of a cardiovascular disease.
So there's a lot of good observational data that shows that there's an association between short and even long sleep and poor cardiovascular outcomes. There's associative data between obstructive sleep apnea and poor cardiovascular outcomes. All poor sleep measures associate. The problem is, what are the causal pathways we still are trying to understand. Using sleep apnea as a great use case, and this will tie into one of the points you were making earlier, or one of the questions you asked earlier. So for sleep apnea, we know that for symptomatic patients, there is benefit when they use treatment. Their symptoms improve, and so they continue, the car accidents goes down, missed days from work goes down, ability to function gets better. Amongst asymptomatic patients who are incidentally diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, if they use CPAP or if they're randomized to CPAP in clinical trials, we don't see improvements in cardiovascular outcomes. And so why is that? And that's why the field is so rich right now in trying to understand which patients should be targeted for treatment. And it's where I see the tech space exploding in terms of its ability to identify and diagnose. Like the Samsung watch was just FDA approved de novo as not really a screening tool, but it's something that can identify moderate to severe sleep apnea risk. But what happens when all those patients self-refer and go to clinic? We don't know. The study populations don't include every single person with a Samsung watch who gets a screen that's positive for moderate to severe sleep apnea. I don't know if those people are at higher cardiovascular risk, and I don't know what happens if we treat all those people. And so that's, I think, where the tech space is accelerating faster than the academics research. And where we need academic industry partnerships to really understand, you can develop a device to screen for low oxygen, but you're now changing what the diagnostic criteria potentially should be for that disorder. You need to have academic industry partnerships to understand what the patient-centered outcome is. Does putting a Samsung watch on everybody improve hard cardiovascular outcomes? That I can't tell you. It certainly will increase the referral base for me, but I don't know that it's going to necessarily increase good outcomes on a population level.
That's good. Natalie, what do you think? What is your suggestion, and what do you think about this gap? If there is a gap in the children, maybe.
There's many gaps. In pediatrics specifically, I think we need better screening tools for obstructive sleep apnea. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in that space. I think there's also opportunities to develop behavioral sleep interventions for infants and toddlers or pediatrics in general that could be led by tech. And I think there are some great examples in the adult space, and there are not great examples in the pediatric space. So they would be the two things that I would.
Okay, I would like to take actually one thing that Oren said before, just to conclude, and then we make the audience to make some questions. And this is something perhaps much more for Marvin and everything. So you said actually you need to have a partnership between pharmaceutical and also who is producing digital tools just to make the proper, because in reality, if you see the title of the panel, what digital tools are, transforming sleep health, the question is, are these digital tools really transforming the sleep tech? Marvin, do you think at the moment, are really transforming, or you really need this collaboration between pharma with some drugs and digital that are helping?
I mean, if we go a little bit back, I think the time before and after Aura, if we talk about Aura again, I think it's had a huge impact on how we perceive sleep. It's a little bit like what the fitness trackers did for preventative physical health. That's what those things are doing now for preventative mental and physical health in a way. So I think there's been a transformation in sleep health over the last 10 years or so, for sure. I'm not sure how you see it.
We've certainly seen the same in pediatrics, for sure, that there is a lot more focus on sleep in infancy than what there ever has been before.
That's good.
Yeah.
Samanta, do you think yes or not?
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to see more and more on this on triage, for example, for sleep apnea, as Oren mentioned, one of the most common sleep issues. So, yeah, if I could just add one thing, I think that what we're missing is, with all of this bunch of innovation in diagnosing, monitoring, what we're going to have to see more and more is someone orchestrating the patient journey. Right? Okay. Like, what is the best diagnosis for this patient? What is the best treatment for this one? How do we monitor this one? So I think that's, someone who can figure out or try to have all of this Frankenstein of solutions put together for the patient, that specific patient, yeah. Okay,
so time is almost off. So we have time for a couple of questions from the audience, if there is any. If there are no questions. There are questions? No questions. So I make, last point. So thank you very much. So we get to the point that we believe that digital tools are transforming the sleep tech. So let's hope to get better tools and to sleep well. So I hope you didn't sleep at this panel. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.